According to 2015 World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report, if we do not initiate some fundamental changes, it will take 81 years to see parity in women's full participation in the economy. The differences in economic participation and disparities in salary for the same quality of work are reflections of ongoing discrimination and inequalities in the labor market, which manifest deeply embedded cultural prejudices. A vast number of women are affected worldwide, including those who are active in the most advanced economies. We must remember that women play a vital role in employment and economic growth. Indeed, by undervaluing women's work and the contributions of women, the whole economy is damaged. The right policies are truly important and do reach the desired effect when in place. A typical example is the significant increase of female participation in the Maltese workforce. This was due to the right strategy, with the subsequent effective policies of opening up free childcare centres for all and the introduction of the in-work benefit. The female participation rate in Malta, in a couple of years, increased from 36% to 52%, truly an effective step forward. Policymakers must keep in mind that women caught in the cycle of poverty are often excluded from those processes that could most directly improve their situation. Their efforts to provide for the families and communities go unrewarded and unrecognized. Their difficulties are further compounded by limited or no access to vital economic resources. The empowerment of these women is therefore a priority that the international community cannot ignore if it is serious about achieving a sustainable future for all. Actually, one of the Sustainable Development Goals proposed by the United Nations last year and agreed by all countries clearly is precisely to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Gender equality in all its forms must be a core goal of development. Surely, this must also include the equality of gender minorities, shifting the power of gender self-determination into the hands of the individual. Women, girls, and gender minorities continue to experience a precarious and disadvantaged status all over the world. This inequality is not limited to location or to whether the situation occurs in poor households or developing countries. Discrimination occurs in places of ostensible peace and all the more overtly in situations of conflict. The goal of empowering women in their homes and communities in striving towards authentic gender equality must therefore also tackle the scourge of gender-based violence. This is a problem around the world, reaching horrific levels in places of war and conflict and direct conflict. On this day, and in this context, we must recognize sexual assault and violence carried out during armed conflict as an act of war. We must acknowledge that even when the conflict is over, the suffering for women and girls persists, mainly through unwanted pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, and stigmatization. This situation is often compounded by lack of medical care and psychological support. Similar hardships are suffered by refugees and internally displaced women. Undoubtedly, refugee women need to have their human rights respected and protected. In times of great hardship, the well-being of women is shattered, families are damaged, and societies must endure generations of renewal in order to overcome the impact of continued violence. In our various capacities, as active citizens of our nations, we must commit ourselves to the drafting, adoption, and implementation of laws that tackle gender-based violence. We must find ways of working alongside our parliamentarians, police officers, legislators, and civil society to ensure that these concerns are taken to heart and translated into practical action. Let me echo the United Nations Girls' Education Initiative in emphasizing that girls' education is one of the major civil rights issues of our times. And here I quote Malala Yousafzai, who had a powerful message to the leaders of the world when she said, "It is not time to tell the leaders to realize how important education is. They already know it. Their own children are in good schools. Now is the time to call them to action," unquote. However, perhaps we should pause for a moment and wonder what kind of education are we so keen to foster within our communities and our countries. We often hear that education is the answer. When I ask people what they believe our primary objective must be in the attainment of well-being and peace, the reply is frequently and repeatedly, education, education, education. While preparing for this contribution, a proverb came to mind, which is found among the peoples of Ghana and Togo, and which says, "Only when the story of the hunt is told by the lion will it cease to glorify the hunter. Until we can be sure that the stories of women's lives reflect the reality of women's experiences, until marginalized communities and peoples are the storytellers of their own hard-won truths, then our histories will remain incomplete. We must never again allow that only certain kinds of knowledge and forms of remembering are privileged at the expense and to raise all others." The growth of the Commonwealth beyond its colonial past has been and will be entirely dependent upon this reality. Diversity and inclusion are not some kind of easy route to justice, equity, and gender equality. We cannot let celebrations like International Women's Day or this festival be our one and only effort. Celebrations must not contribute to an already dominating discourse, but they need to be seen as a means to decenter and deconstruct that dominance in the service of the excluded, the marginalized, and the vulnerable. We cannot allow ourselves and our lives to become complicit in processes of oppression experienced by women and girls around the globe. To do this would be to insulate such narratives from criticism. They would rob our initiatives of all dynamism and meaning. Rather, we must reach down to the root of our concerns and confront the violence beneath the surface. The threat of gender-based violence is not normal. The suffering of women and girls, forced into positions of subordination in so many parts of the world, is not normal. The silencing of women and girls, their continued exclusion from positions of political participation, and their diminished capacity to benefit from economic growth is not normal. These are, in fact, deformations of fundamental human dignity, and they must be named as such. This week I was pleasantly surprised to discover at a screening of the recent film Suffragette, organized in Malta a few days ago on the occasion of International Women's Day, that it is the first feature-length cinematic treatment of women's suffrage movement ever made in British cinema history. Whatever our reactions to the film may be, it was the first time that a sustained portrayal of the movement and its legacy has been produced. Seen, in fact, by millions of people around the world, it reminds us of the dehumanization, de-degradation, and the destruction of human life endured by female activists in Britain. We must not allow this history to be forgotten. I know that there is more that unites us rather than that drives us apart. The celebration of our differences will be instrumental in bringing us closer, in creating authentic encounters between women from vastly different cultures and traditions. We must learn to recognize and accept the validity of traditions that are not necessarily our own, but have so much to teach us. Above all, we must encourage the role of women in shaping the direction for the future. Therefore, let us understand by the convening of the first Women's Forum at CHOG in Malta 2015, a deep commitment on behalf of the Commonwealth to the estimated 1 billion women living within it, a commitment to the need for their concerns to be heard, for our active engagement in the struggle to have those concerned addressed. The cause of gender equality is to be shared among us all, as individuals and nations, and the global community invested in the well-being of every human person. One such initiative, spearheaded by UN Women, is the He for She Solidarity Movement. Its goal is to engage men and boys as agents of change within their communities, working together for the achievement of gender equality and women's rights. By encouraging men and boys to take direct action against the inequalities faced by women and girls, we can more fully appreciate the need for gender equality as a universally human concern. As one of the 10 world leaders selected to champion the movement, I am committed to the work at hand. Alongside my foundation for the well-being of society, we have begun a national campaign that seeks to address issues of gender inequality, to challenge male privilege, and to champion the participation of women and girls throughout the Maltese Islands, and eventually within the Mediterranean region. Community leaders, representatives from the business sector, academics, and activists have joined our campaign to deliver a message of equality. A key message of the campaign is that gender equality is not an issue faced by women alone. It is a human rights issue that affects us all, from which we all stand to benefit, liberating us from the dual chains of privilege and oppression. In looking at a more equal future, free from inequalities, we must all recognize that gender inequality negatively affects each one of us, and that gender equality brings an opportunity for all to enjoy their fundamental human rights. I hope that this festival shall continue to provide a space in which we may consider the contributions that each of us must make in a spirit of collaboration towards the political, economic, and cultural transformation of our societies. Let us pursue the well-being of women and girls, of all people, with renewed strength and conviction. Let us never cease from asking ourselves, how can we best identify the opportunities and the barriers faced by women in the 21st century? How can we build supportive networks that unite people of all genders around our shared goals? And ultimately, how can we, in every way we can, strive towards the liberation and the well-being of our nations, our communities, our families, and ourselves? Thank you.